always was just drafting. So I have a ton of Magic drafting experience, both physical and online, which is, again, kind of like similar niche. There's something really exciting about a Magic draft in that there is, about slamming two SolForge decks together. So other than that, though, I've always played tabletop games, kind of like heavier strategy games. More like Axis and Allies or, some of those heavier tabletop games. And then I'm learning or relearning, I guess, Age of Empires 2 with my son right now as kind of a resurgence or renaissance nostalgia. So that's a small side project we have going on right now.
Yeah, I have a 4-year-old and he comes to the card shop with me and he'll sit during events and tournaments and he'll say, "Good job, Dad," or "You get him," and he'll let me play the cards sometimes. And man, it's fun to see all of that again through another person's eyes, through your child's eyes. It's great.
It really is, yeah.
Let's move on to part 2, which I call transformations. So, were there any milestones along the way, thinking back to your time with SolForge Fusion, that really changed how you felt about the game? So these could be like events that you went to. I don't know if you're the type of person that's ever been to a Fuse Fest or a Gen Con or something like that.
The biggest event I've attended personally was probably the Gen Con release event in 2022. It was kind of like my premier Gen Con experience that year. Was the game I was most excited to play. The game had just come out. I played the Kickstarter backer tournament and I'd done well in that. And then one of the community members, I can't remember, it might have been more than most, had run like a kind of a Discord competitive tournament that I took first in. And so I went and played in the Gen Con event thinking, I'll actually be able to compete here. And I remember it was actually really close. And I remember I just totally botched one of my games in there. Just wasn't thinking through, missed that they had lethal on the board with a Forgeborn ability, didn't even look at their Forgeborns. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this game has so much going on. There's a lot of buzz in the community. And I remember, that Gen Con event was really, really exciting for me and definitely something that just made me realize like, wow, I'm playing SolForge competitively and having a blast with it, because I haven't really had a lot of fun playing card games competitively. I don't know. The atmosphere has always been kind of gloomy and kind of just like folks playing for their, to grind their next, regional qualifier or whatever. And the people are kind of, I don't know. The atmosphere has never been that great for me playing competitive games in the physical space. And anyways, I will say Gen Con was the complete opposite. It was a bunch of very friendly folks having a blast playing, and the community was small. And so for me, it was just like, man, I really like the game and I really like the community.
There's nothing better than sitting across the table from somebody who's there to have fun. And I think there's just something about limited and sealed formats in general that encourages people to just, you're here, we're going to have an experience together, and let's not worry too much about who wins. Let's just have a really cool exploration together. OzForge hosted a sealed tournament recently, so just using the collection manager to generate random decks. But you and your round one opponent looked at each other's pairings and had to select the worst for each other, and then you played the whole tournament with the worst deck that your opponent could generate for you and vice versa. And it was amazing, the vibe of just sitting down from your opponent. You're both playing the most trashy thing that each other could generate. And everyone was so relaxed and calm and having fun because there were no expectations. Like, you're playing a trashy deck, of course you're not going to win. And it was just amazing how that added to that vibe. I think, that's kind of what you're chasing too, that feeling of, we're just here, we all love the game together, let's play. And it's wonderful. And I've had that experience too with some of the more competitive games I've played, where you sit down across from a player, you both really want to win, you're not talking that much. It's just very different kind of vibe.
Yeah, there is something about the SolForge community. I don't think I have had a bad experience. I've maybe had some short or quick, I've played a lot of games in the community at this point, both physical and online in the client, and, tournaments where you're getting on to the Discord voice. And I honestly can say I have not had a bad experience with an opponent yet. And I've probably played, 100 plus different folks in the community. There's been maybe a couple folks who were quick, short, ready to move on. but like 90% of the folks have been friendly, helpful, so I don't know, there's been something very warm about the community that I've not felt in another community.
I can totally relate because I feel the exact same way. What does it feel like for you when you sit down to play SolForge? Like, imagine if we were pulling up a set of cards right now, you just run your starting 5. Like, what is it that goes through your mind as you start to play a game, do you think, if you can encapsulate that in some words? I know it's a pretty esoteric concept I'm launching here.
I mean, it's probably my favorite part, right? You've just shuffled in your tier 1 stack. You've got 20 cards and you're hoping, you're looking to draw your first 5 cards, and you're just thinking like, man, I know what I built my deck around, or my sealed deck, or whatever it is. I know there's a couple combinations that I'm really looking to see here, or a couple cards that I really want to pull right now just to make sure I get them leveled because they're important to the long-term strategy of the deck. And then you pull those 5 cards and it's like a combination of either this is exactly what I wanted, or ooh, couple awkward pieces, I need to get them leveled, but they don't work it all together, or like, wow, I completely missed everything that I needed here. And what am I going to do about it, right? How do I navigate this situation? How do I react to what my opponent's doing? Like, it is my favorite part is probably the very first hand. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say that they're that much, the later hands aren't any worse, but there's something about that first hand, the board's empty and it's just like, okay, here we go. It's just, I don't know. It's magical. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The options are so open to you at that point. I spend a lot of time on that first turn too, because I know that this is going to be pivotal for how I'm going to play the rest of the game in terms of the upgrades. And I do love that on, your next turns, there's that equal chance of, is it going to be in the last 5 or am I going to get it next turn? Is it going to be in the next 5? That's sort of fun to watch that tension roll out. I guess controversial, but some people with their Krogius 3, if they're not army commandering it, and it's like, when's it going to be? Am I going to be on Forge? Am I going to be off Forge? Is it going to be in the bottom 5?
Yeah, I actually think the most impactful draw for me that I can remember in most of my games is going into turn 3, that first draw into it where you've got, a handful of cards at level 3. You also have a bunch still at level 1. And usually by turn 3, it's like, if they play a big threat down, it's just like, okay, the tempo is going to start to swing quickly one direction. And so that turn 3 draw is always the most like nerve wracking of like, am I going to lose my tempo? Am I going to gain tempo here? And so there's something really, it's exciting because there's a lot of variance in that poll, but I also think there's just a tremendous amount of strategy still in terms of, okay, I didn't hit what I needed, but I have to figure out, I've still got to figure out what I'm going to level for the future. I still got to figure out how I can get the most value out of the synergy of the cards I have in my hand. And I still got to react to what my opponent's doing, right? And there's just so many little interesting decisions that I do think I've had a lot of people locally kind of get frustrated by that moment in time, that turn 3 cycle 1 draw, and just like, okay, the game was decided for me right then and there. And I definitely recognize that can be frustrating or, really exciting of a draw. But I just think there's so much. I think you take it for granted how complex the board state is at that moment in time. And to be able to navigate that, I think, is what really sets a good player apart from a newer player or, somebody that's trying to figure out how the game works still.
And I definitely feel like part of, like, I'm trying to explore here, what is it that makes us both kind of excited in the same way about this game? Don't you think there's a beauty in that any card in your hand is playable, that you're not mana screwed or you're not mana flooded or I don't have the resources yet to play that, I pulled it at the wrong time? Anything is playable. And I think that's got to be part of it. For opportunities are endless here, Do you think that's it for you? Have you played other games without a resource system or like a buried resource system like this game has?
Yeah, no, I don't think I've played a lot that have this style. I mean, Keyforge was it had a similar kind of, non-generic, system. But the other piece that I would say that makes SolForge so exciting is the idea that the lane combat and the way the creatures work, especially if you're off Forge, like if they have a 15-7 coming in, huge stats, that you can actually still remove it and compete, right, with a 7/2 level 1 raptor or something, right? And there's something really exciting about getting that value, getting rid of their level 3 with your level 1. You also leveled it up and they've now lost that level 3 resource. Like there's something really exciting about the trading of resources and figuring out how to leverage your underdrops against their overdrops, right? And try to swing the momentum in your favor and both leveling up for the future.
Couldn't agree more. And another thing, since we're both Keyforge players, another thing is I always struggled with the decision points about reaping versus fighting. And I know the game itself, its economy kind of pushed you into reaping more than combat to be sort of mathematically efficient quite often. I'm loving 5 lanes, I have to say, because my cognitive brain could not manage a 12 stack or a 13 stack, or playing in tournaments where you keep trying to borrow room from the person sitting on your left or right because your battle line is getting huge. So maybe let's talk about that for a second. And this is my first lane-based system. And I don't know, at the time I remember seeing games with lanes and thinking, what's so special? But now I'm like, I can process five lanes of information. I can process that with exalts and creatures, but I'd like, the rest of my brain to be thinking about strategy and not forgetting, there's a creature over there that has a passive or a static effect that's affecting, just those obscene board states.
Yeah, honestly, I am with you there. That is probably what pushed me away from Keyforge the most, were the complex board states and the decision point of, okay, I've got a 2/2/2 hand, and apologize if the listeners haven't played Keyforge, so I probably should be a little too careful here. But there was some decision points there that got so complex where I'm gonna, I can call this house, and then I'm gonna draw 4 cards, and maybe those are gonna be cards I need, and then then I've got 8 creatures I have to make decisions on what I want to do with, and then all the sequencing matters as well. So I have to then, play out the turn in my head. It was just like the board state and the complexities it was just too much. And for me, I just don't enjoy that really, that style of play.
Same.
I really like the limited decisions you have in SolForge that are impactful, and there's a tremendous amount of small nuance to them. But you don't have infinite decisions. In fact, oftentimes it is kind of nice because you've got 2 level 3 cards and a level 2 card, and you're just kind of like, okay, sequencing matters a little bit, right? But I kind of know what my turn is going to look like. And so I've really enjoyed how quickly the game pace keeps up because of that.
I could talk to you all day about this. I might have to do a follow-up episode at some point. But I should keep on to keep these in manageable length. So these episodes are not designed to be evergreen in any way. So people listening now or in the future, keep in mind, we're talking about the game in May 2024. What do you love about the state of the game right now? Is it, that we're on the eve of set 3 to last winter? Is there something else about where we're at the moment that you love?
I am a firm believer, having been in the game for a year and a half. I've built algorithms on evaluating decks. I am a firm believer that the meta is not fully solved. And it's kind of 2-part. One is, I believe there are some decks you can put together that are not normal that can begin to crack into top tier decks. And then the second piece is, what I still love about this game is, even if you're looking to play a meta deck and let's say you're going to get into a Rumblespark deck, or you're going to try to get into maybe a Darkforge Drain deck or something, there are so many interesting decisions in, okay, I've got this primary Rumblespark deck that I think is really good, but I've got 8 different decks, including multiple different colors that I want to pair it with. And I just get to play them all together, right? And I'm never gonna have time to play all the combinations out together. So I'm just like jamming games. And I just think there's so much exploration still to this day for somebody who's jammed as many games as there are, that it's just so exciting, right? Whereas, because traditionally at this point, a lot of decks are kind of fleshed out. The pieces you need, you just buy the cards, slot them in, go to the tournament. And in this case, it's just like you get to make all these meaningful deck building decisions, and and it's just so exciting on both those fronts. One is to make meaningful deck building decisions in an archetype that's kind of already been found, and then just looking for decks. I mean, I was playing, and actually I think you may have picked it up, but I was playing the Betrayer Magnetic Field deck.
Yes, I'm so excited. I've picked that up and I'm so excited to play it. I was
having success with that deck, and I was like, I've opened a ton of set 2, and that's the only Betrayer Soulbind I've ever opened. And it's like you could just do wacky things with those kind of cards, and it's just like I was actually like crushing some of the actual like good tier 2, tier 1 ish decks with that deck, and just thinking like, is this an